let's move to Michigan, which just announced that it was the winner of a $2.5 billion investment from Ford into a new battery plant in Marshall, Michigan, which was basically right smack in the middle of the state. Will create 2,500 direct jobs. The multiplier on that, they said, was something like 4. So you're talking about 10,000 jobs supported in the area. Plus, once you get to that, you're talking about building an entire kind of economic engine for an area. I think this is maybe 30, 40 minutes. You might know this area better from Kalamazoo. What makes this entire fight so fascinating is that this was an investment that Ford had been kind of taking around the country to see what would be the best spot to plant it. And it made news because Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin withdrew Virginia and said, we don't want your money, calling it basically a front for the Chinese Communist Party. Crystal Ball reported on this a couple weeks ago. Let's run a little bit of her monologue on that.
Governors go to great lengths in order to attract these types of jobs into their own states. But here, Governor Youngkin has gone in the total opposite direction in what at first blush might seem a surprising move. Here's the Washington Post, quote, Governor Glenn Youngkin said this week that he had rejected efforts by Ford Motor Company to consider locating an electric battery plant in Virginia over concerns that the automaker's partnership with China created a security risk. Quote, we felt that the right thing to do was to not recruit Ford as a front for China to America, Youngkin said Wednesday night to reporters after delivering his State of the Commonwealth speech to the General Assembly.
Emily, is there any way to defend Glenn Youngkin here, or is this as bad as it looks?
I have a couple possibilities I think might be going on. One, I don't know that this is true. It's a guess. I do wonder if he knew that it was going to Michigan and then made a statement about withdrawing to look tough on China as people are floating his name as a potential presidential contender. And then, what do you think about that?
Yeah, we don't want your stupid factory anyway. Get out of here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Those grapes look sour.
Exactly.
I didn't want those.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It allows him to, to take a really bold stance. On the other hand, it's tough because I think the type of voter that he wants to appeal to, and Virginia and its rural areas is very, very red, actually probably doesn't want to get completely entangled in a company that is also entangled with China. But I think Crystal and you are raising a really interesting point, which is Glenn Youngkin, Mr. P.E. Baron, Patagonia vest wearing champion of the new right, champion of the populist right. I mean, it's always been a very strange conception or a strange caricature of what Glenn Youngkin actually is, because he did talk so, I think, capably about some cultural issues, especially education, when he was on the campaign trail and he won in an upset over Terry McAuliffe. But then that slots him into this position of populist because he checks off some of the cultural boxes that he might not check off when it comes to economic issues, because, again, we're talking about a guy who was a PE magnate, basically. So that's a real tension.
He's from Carlyle Group. That's the PE firm that he was at, right?
Yeah, it is. And I actually remember, it reminds me of what we were talking about in the last segment. I reported this a couple of years back, I think, that Glenn Youngkin had signed a letter when he was at the head of the Carlyle Group diverting funds to BLM. So again, you just see where this tension exists with Glenn Youngkin as sort of a populist champion and Glenn Youngkin as also a business champion.
And Carlyle, while Youngkin was there, did enormous amounts of business with China. So I would suspect that his advisors have been telling him, okay, this is a huge vulnerability for you. And so this might be a way that he thinks he's going to then push back against it. To me, it probably goes way too far because it's brutal for him that it's Ford. And there are people in Michigan who are like, you're kicking Ford out for being a front for the Chinese Communist Party. Like, if we can't have a Ford plant, then what plants can we have? And also, if you're not willing to have any manufacturing, in your state that has a linkage along the supply line with China, then you're basically not going to have any manufacturing. Like, that's basically what you got.
Yeah, and that also makes me think potentially more about the theory that he sort of, whether or not he actually knew these were going to Michigan, maybe he had a very strong suspicion that they were going to Michigan and used it as an opportunity then to signal on China. Because if he did do a lot of business with China at the Carlyle Group, you'd think he would be friendly enough to take the jobs and then also take the, if he knows this is already a vulnerability for him, he would take the jobs, especially since it's Ford, and then, continue to have positive ties with China. It's sort of a win-win because, again, it's Ford. It's not, we're not talking about a Chinese company. But to your point, if you're just going to grandstand over any company with any ties in the manufacturing supply chain to China, it's going to be impossible to have manufacturing jobs in Virginia.
Right, you're right. There's basically no company that you're going to be able to find that doesn't have some supply connection. Now, obviously, a battery plant is going to be the most, but if you're going to dislodge China from a monopolistic kind of control of that, you're going to have to first, build up some capacity. Like it's not, you can't just flick a switch and instantly have a kind of self-sustaining domestic clean energy industry when you've allowed China so far to basically lock down pretty much a global monopoly on it. So it does mean that, you basically just can't do anything if you're a governor who doesn't want to be at all involved with China. It also reminded me, a lot of populists over hundreds of years have said the thing we need are term limits. And I get that because it's like, this is how you get back at those career politicians. But guess what? Because Virginia has a single term limit on its governorship, that as soon as that person gets there, they're no longer thinking about Virginia voters. They're thinking about where they're headed next. And so he's thinking more about Republican primary presidential voters, probably, than he is Virginia voters, because he doesn't have to face them for re-election. And so folks out in Southwest Virginia all of a sudden have no power over him, or have no sway.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.